Welcome to the Rise and Thrive Personal Growth Community. If you like this content, please hit the subscribe button. And if you make it halfway through this video, then please join my Facebook group, the Rise and Thrive Personal Growth Community on Facebook. Today, we are going to be talking about loss. And because it's such a serious subject, I am going to start with a joke. So there was this holy man who came into a classroom, one of those real pious type guys, and he asked the students what a tragedy was. He wanted to teach them the meaning of tragedy. So one little kid raised his hand and he says, I know, it would be a tragedy if my brother was walking to school and he got hit by a car and he died. And the priest says, that's not really a tragedy, that's more of like an accident. We need a real tragedy here. Who knows? So another little kid raises his hand and he says, I know. It would be a tragedy if a whole busload of us children went off a cliff and we all died. And the holy man says, that's not really a tragedy. I mean, it's not great, but we'd maybe say that's a great loss. And so finally this other little kid speaks up. He's like, I know what would be a tragedy. He says, what's that, young man? I think it would be a tragedy if you were with a bunch of other holy men just like yourself, and you were in an airplane, and they got struck by lightning, and it fell out of the sky, and you all died. He says, that would be a tragedy. But why did you say that? He said, well, I figured it probably wouldn't be an accident, and it really wouldn't be a great loss. It's a silly joke. Play on words, probably doesn't translate into other languages. But I wanted to go over loss and grief and what we can do about it because it's had a profound effect on my life. When I finally started doing loss and grief work, I had some profound changes in the success and the trajectory of my life. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you my greatest loss, and I'm going to show you how I got there. I followed a method through the Grief Recovery Handbook. It's written by John James and Russell Friedman. And their method is to make a timeline of your life. So you make a graph from your first conscious memory all the way until present time. And on that graph, you put positive and negative events. And depending on how positive or negative the event, you make a longer line. So I'll just give you a quick example. So positive event, negative, positive, negative. And you're not going to go through your entire every moment, but there's certain things as you look back in life that kind of stick out. You have these, Inside Out calls them like these special memories. Remember some of the balls in that movie would glow and they're like, oh, this is a special one. You have those in your brain. So those memories were like, wow, that really hurt. Maybe this is a big death in the family. Maybe this is something smaller, but it still hurt. This is maybe that one of the best days of your life, best memories you've ever had. Again, negative, positive, but you can see how you would do this. And then I worked with a counselor and we went through this and we figured out some of the things in my life and we hit on the biggest negative, the thing that I drew the longest line on, and that's what we decided to do our first recovery graph on. I did this with a lady named Cynthia Scanlon. She has a website called Moments That Make You, and she is a wonderful grief recovery therapist, also does NLP work, which I'll get into NLP at some point on this channel. It's super interesting work. If you've never done or heard of neuro-linguistic programming, something you gotta look into. Excellent for dealing with tragedy and trauma. So, getting back to loss and grief, I'm going to just read something from Atlas of the Heart. I love Brene Brown, and I feel like Atlas of the Heart has been a huge gift to humanity. She gets really granular with emotional language, so it helps you to figure out the difference between simple sadness and grief, difference between compassion and empathy. These words that we use almost interchangeably, but they mean different things, and it really affects how we show up and interact with other people. So I'm gonna just read what she wrote about grief. It's so amazing. This is from Atlas of the Heart. So she had a conversation with David Kessler, and he said this: each person's grief is as unique as their fingerprint. But what everyone has in common is that no matter how they grieve, they share the need for their grief to be witnessed. Everybody needs their grief to be witnessed. In his book, Personality Isn't Permanent, Benjamin Hardy says that grief and tragedy aren't things that happen to us, but they're things that happen to us in the absence of having an empathetic witness, somebody who can really listen and pay attention and understand what we are saying and going through. And the reason I'm saying this, and here's a little warning for you, if you're my close friends or family, you might not want to watch what my biggest loss is. It kind of affects the family. It's kind of sad. And I just don't want to trigger anybody. But if you can really be an empathetic witness and hear somebody else's hurt without taking it personal, that is huge. And again, I'm going to go back to Atlas of the Heart on what compassion is. Compassion is a place that we go with others. And it's not that we put ourselves above somebody else and say, poor you, poor thing, I'm so sorry for you. It is thinking, wow, that sucks. And then thinking, could have been me. I've been there. Something terrible like that has happened to me, or something awful has happened to me. Here's another quote from Atlas of the Heart. It's only when we know our own darkness well, only when we know our own darkness well, can we be present with the darkness of others. Having compassion is knowing that we're all capable of hurt and pain to others. And empathy is different than compassion. Empathy is a tool of compassion. So I would personally urge anybody who's listening to this to try to develop that tool of empathy. It is such a strong tool, and it's what's missing from so much of our society. So much of what we have around us is people not connecting with us. People don't feel felt even after they express their feelings. Empathy allows you to listen to somebody else and not be affected. It's not walking a mile in somebody else's shoes, or it's not your pain in my heart. If you're with somebody and they tell you about their loneliness, you don't have to suddenly start feeling lonely to help them. Then you just have two lonely people. What you do need to be able to do is look back into your conscious memory and think, when was I lonely? Have I ever felt that before? Look into your experience. And it's not going to be the same loneliness that they felt, but can you see that you could have had a similar feeling, and then see how this person feels? Empathy allows you to understand what somebody else is feeling and then reflect it back to that person. Reflect back to them that you get it, that you understand. So it can be really tricky to be empathetic. It can be hard to connect. It's not a putting down. It's just allowing yourself to sit with somebody, saying, wow, I'm so sorry, and move on with the conversation. Sit with it. Help somebody else to understand. So I am now going to share with you my greatest loss. And the way I came to this was off my loss history graph, my biggest negative, the thing that's been the most difficult on me. And it's just based on how it has impacted my life. And I'm not trying to hurt anybody in my family's feelings, but by far it was the divorce of my parents. And it was just so dramatic the way that everything came about. There was a really dramatic day where I came home from school, and for some reason somebody told me that there was a surprise when I got home, and there was no surprise. The surprise was that my mom had left. I think I shared this in another video, but she ended up coming back to the family, and then there was 2 years of some arguing, and them trying to work things out, and then it didn't work out, and they ended up divorced. This happened though right as I was adolescent, right as I was trying to figure out who I was. And the loss of my family, our family, it just felt so perfect. We lived in a house, and my great-grandparents lived on the basement. My grandparents lived on the first floor, and then our family lived on the top 2 floors. Everybody that I knew in my family, my grandma had 6 children, and all my aunts and uncles all lived within 1 mile of me. I could bicycle to everybody's house, friends with all the cousins, wonderful family reunions, get-togethers. That's how I remember them. And that came crashing down, and it was gone. We moved, we left. Everybody else in the family got divorced. Everybody except for one of the children got divorced. All my aunts and uncles are divorced except for one couple. And losing that family structure, I feel like I'm not alone in this in America. I feel like there's this, it's called atomification, the singling out of people where we're just so divided from our family. Losing the family unit like that, and yeah, I'm very close to my mom, I'm very close to my dad, but the loss of that structure, and who knows, even if my parents had stayed together, everybody else might have divorced and still lost it. We lose things in life, right? Even everything could have gone well, somebody could die. A lot of people, a death is the biggest loss. If I had to sit with somebody who had a deep loss and they had lost somebody to death, I would have to look back into my experience and consider that loss of my family, the loss of that unit, and I could grieve with them. I could understand, yes, I felt this before, I felt terrible like that. I know what it's like to not be able to get something back, because that thing is not going back together. Then my grandma died, and even further separation, it feels like. The family gets together still. It's not the same. That thing is gone. And it's okay. Out of the ashes, we build new stuff. And the richest soil on the earth is in the redwood forests, where these 1,000-year-old trees have fallen. Great loss, right? And they've decomposed and built this super vibrant, rich soil. So out of our losses come a rich soil. Those of us who have lived the most, especially the elderly, if you've lived and had tragedy and gotten through it and done the work, and you can sit with people, you have the greatest gift to humanity. And as you go through your losses, it's so important to find that empathetic witness and to take your experience and grow from it. There are a lot of Bible verses that talk about this. Consider it all joy when you meet with various trials and oppositions, knowing as you do that it works out a tested quality of your faith. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning says the best way of being is to have been. The elderly, the aged, they have already been. They've already lived their life. It's sure. It's happened. Those of us who are a little bit younger or even younger than me, you don't know. You haven't experienced it yet. It's all a mystery. So many unwritten pages. But somebody who has a lot of pages written down in their book, they have a lot to look back with and empathize on. So please use your gifts. Please empathize with one another. It's okay to share your losses with somebody, but you got to find people who can listen. Find your community. That's something I'm trying to set up with this Rise and Thrive community, is a place where we can get together, empathetic, real people who are interested in growth. Have a wonderful day.